everyone. Welcome to Yin Radio TV. I'm your host, Hillary Raimo. Joining me tonight is spiritual teacher, intuitive speaker, musician, composer, sound engineer, guitarist, singer, healer of vibrational medicine, father and author of best-selling book, The Divine Principle Anchoring Heaven on Earth. Keith Anthony Blanchard is here with me tonight, and we have a great show planned. Very excited. Lots of great things to talk about. Welcome, Keith. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Hillary.
So you do all these amazing things. Tell me a little bit about how your story started. How did you get into music and spirituality? What was the catalyst of your path?
Pain was the catalyst of my path. So in a relationship for 10 years, it went south. I had nothing. Keep in mind, I'm a professional musician, or at least at that time in my life, I was an aspiring musician. So I had the girlfriend, leaned on her for the food, for the shelter, for the transportation, everything a musician and a girlfriend's dynamic between them would be. As a boy, 7, 8 years old, I had 4 basic questions that were resounding within me. Consciously and unconsciously, it was part of my life's destiny, for sure. Where did I come from? Why am I here? Who am I? And where am I going? And at about 8, 9 years old, I became an altar boy. Believe it or not, I loved it. I absolutely loved being an altar boy. And I think it was something about looking at the bulletin board to see if my name was going to be in lights to be an altar boy for the next church service. About the age of 15 years old, I was seriously considering becoming a Catholic priest. That's funny if you know me. And so my dad gives me an electric guitar eventually. God goes in the closet and the guitar stays out. And I did that 10-year relationship. And after that relationship dissolved, I had nothing. I had no sense of self. I had no possessions. I had no life. What I had was depression and despair. And I was in a dark night of the soul. And after about a couple of years of just not being back to fully normal, I began to say this fervent prayer out loud, actually. I need to hear your voice, meaning God. And though I asked this prayer 3 weeks to a month, I don't think it was the length of time that it took for God to be convinced to go, I think he's serious now, I'm going to show up. It was the passion and the sincerity I had in my heart and the fire and the yearning. I needed it. I wanted it. I was salivating over it. And one morning, after about 3 weeks to a month, a night of playing music at the casino, which is about 7 sets, which is grueling, I had no intentions of having a far-out experience. And about 7 in the morning, I hear, "Good morning, Keith. It's time for you to wake up." So I wake up thinking someone was in my house. No one was in my house. So I lay back in bed to go back to sleep. And I hear, "Good morning, Keith. I asked you to awaken." And not only did this voice mean, wake up from your night's sleep, that you have been called. It's time to wake up out of your human slumber. I was thrown into the light. I had a divine experience. As this experience was being had, I could smell the voice. I can taste the voice. I can hear the voice. I could feel the voice. I could see the voice. It was everything imaginable. And the voice instructs me what I call whole thought versus linear thoughts, thoughts that follow thoughts. In this one impression, this one beautiful idea was everything it wanted. And it said, "Go sit on the sofa and press record on your tape player and let your mouth move." And I said, "I don't know how to do this. And what will I talk about?" It said, "Keith, follow the instruction." There was no time for fear. There was just no time for fear. I did as the voice instructed, press record, and out came volumes of the most far out material I did this for about a year. And this began the dialogue of the divine principle, which is God and I having a dialogue. And closing off this story, after about a year of sitting down and thinking and meditating on what to write, the voice told me in a meditation very clearly, "Keith, don't write anymore from this point of view. Let your thoughts, feelings, and life experiences begin to shape the book, refine it, and become the glue that I now know as the divine principle, anchoring heaven on earth."
Wow, what a great story. So when you started to write the book, you were therefore in communication with this voice, the Spirit of God, if you will? And did it stay with you through the whole book as you wrote it and shape the book itself? And then what happened when you were done with the book? What happened to the voice after you completed your task?
That is a very fantastic question. And as long as I've been doing the Divine Principle dance, I think you might be the first person to ask me that question, which I'm really excited about answering. So thank you very much.
I'm good at it.
Shortly after the voice, God, higher self, whatever term you choose, made its presence known to me in that very conscious way. It was with me, literally like a Siamese twin. It was at my side. It always is, as it is with all of us. But I felt it, and it was persistent. It was truly with me in a field-based, conscious way. And it lingered for the 8 years that first year it took to write and the 7 years to live it. I didn't want to just recite information in a book and not have lived the ideas. That's just not real for me. So I actually lived all the principles, and to know that they're absolutely solid, profound. I still feel it. I know it's there. I know it's me, and I know it's everything. I know it's this dialogue you and I have beautifully. But to answer your question, it's not as prominent and present as if you would have a friend literally standing next to you in your own room. After the book, same thing applies. It's still here, and I can lean into it and feel it, but it's not so much like leaning on me.
Because you completed your work. Maybe you did the book.
Yeah. For that time, for sure.
It always seems to be some kind of message, some kind of nudge to get us to do our own sacred work, because I see it a lot where people just get lost or distracted, or they don't listen to the voice, or the voice will then come through other people, and we'll have a series of synchronistic events happen that are basically telling you to listen, until either you do and you do it, or you don't, and it goes and finds somebody else to manifest through. Do you think that would have happened if you had not listened?
Absolutely. I think that is more true for everyone versus the lesser of the group. We're hard-headed. We are hard-headed. We can be. And that was the case for me. It took that for me. And like you said, if you don't make this your turn and move through that window of opportunity, it will find someone else and land on them. And you can bet that if it takes the next time for it to come around, you probably will wish you had listened the prior time, because it's going to hit you harder. It will get your attention.
Yeah. Well, I have always found with me, I can speak from personal experience that I've had the same experience as you. It's like you just have to do it. And then if you do it, you get on the other side of it. And then there's still more magic that comes from having created something. So when you finished your first book, were you doing, now I want to explain to the viewers that you and I know each other previously. We've done a couple shows together in the past.
Quite a few, actually.
You also have your own radio show. Why don't you tell us about that?
The show I'm doing now is Center of Light Radio, and you can catch that broadcast Monday nights at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at centeroflightradio.com. That was birthed because a friend of mine 4 or so years ago was doing a radio show on Blog Talk, and it was called The Searcher's Roadmap. And he says, Keith, I just need some relief for about 6 weeks. Do you think you can do such a thing? I said, I've been interviewed quite a few times. I think I can play that role. And 6 weeks turned into 3 years. But at the tail end of The Searcher's Roadmap, the name didn't feel like me. All of my life, spiritual life, I go by the name of Ya Nava and Yana in short. And this was always with me, Yana, O Center of Light. And it took me some spiritual research to find out what this meant, which is my higher self name, YAHNAHVAH, Yanava. And when I decided it's time for me to get out of the Blog Talk box, it was a great platform to learn my craft, and I'm grateful for that. And then I made contact with a friend who was doing a radio show on a different network. And the bandwidth, the quality of the audio is just completely night and day. And so we started the show last April 20th, I believe, on this radio network called Center of Light Radio. And I have a listenership now of about 9 months into it of over 1 million.
Wow, congratulations. Very
Thank
nice.
you very much. Thank you.
And so after you launched Anchoring Heaven and Earth, how did the concept relate to your life at that point? Were you in the process of understanding what that means to anchor heaven into earth? And how did that reflect in your personal life as a man walking through the world doing what you do?
Many years ago, when I first started my spiritual walk, I was in a bookstore and I found a book by Patricia Cota Robles. And it's called What on Earth is Going On? I recently interviewed her. She's a world-renowned spiritual teacher. I recently interviewed her on Center of Light. And for some reason, the concepts and ideas in that book are heaven and earth, beings of light, we are the light. And that just really felt like me. She helped me in that book unfold an understanding and a conscious knowledge of my divine script. And those words, heaven on earth, light, center of light, beings of light, all that was so me. And I absolutely know now, emphatically, bones to bones, through and through, without a doubt, that my life, the rest of my life, is about becoming a lightning rod for God energies and to continue to manifest that on earth. And it is my absolute conviction, knowing that if God, higher source, higher consciousness, is a being or a consciousness or an existence of absolute love, that when we do what we love, that lightning rod moves through all of us and we begin to emit all these creative God energies on the earth. So to me, it's about aligning with source by doing what you love, being blissful. That's my spirituality, is be blissful.
Now, when you say God, what is your concept of God? Because God means so many things to different people. And you have a Catholic upbringing, correct? So you were brought up with a concept of God that sounds completely opposite of what you just described. So how was that conflict resolved within your consciousness?
Well, I am recovering from Catholicism. Agree. It's totally opposite of what I grew up from. You know, I've always said when I get on Oprah, when she asked me that question, what is God to you? I wouldn't give a response. I would just walk over to her, as I'm metaphorically doing you, since you asked me the question first.
Well,
I would hug you.
Oprah of the alternative media. How's that?
I would get up and hug you. That would be my definition of God. And I would fall into you until a level that we would meld into a place where I truly get to know you. That would be God for me. We can use a bunch of terminology, love, awareness, eternity, all these wonderful words that describe fragments of creator. But for me, it's truly a space of humility and vulnerability. And when you start playing with that kind of energy, you literally split yourself in half. Something else begins to happen.
So what was the catalyst for you? I mean, describe that moment where your belief system as a young person was changed by your experience of a different kind of spirituality. How did that breakdown look for you? Was it dramatic, or was it not so dramatic and a little bit just easy?
I've always known, even though I was raised Catholic, you know, I think Catholicism, out of all this different sects of Christianity, is probably, to me, the most beautiful, because it's very participatory. You stand up, you kneel down, you sing, you're involved. It's a beautiful way. Now, that being said, I'm not too fond of the dogma, but I never really believed it. I never really believed that stuff associated with Catholicism. So my transition was smoother in that sense. The difficulty lied when I made the division between God and my rock and roll music, because I wanted to be a rock star. And I didn't think, at least with that mindset, that they could coexist. We know what rock stars. I was never really a rock star per se, but I did live the lifestyle. And over the course of my life, when that all became one, it was a smooth transition. I realized that music is the universal language, and it's probably one of the most beautiful expressions of creator.
Now, you talk about music as a healing modality. So when did you make the leap again from, I'm talking about transitions for a reason, we'll get to that. But I mean, when did you make the leap from, I want to be a rock and roll star to sound being a healing modality? Was that always part of your, I want to be a rock star dream? Or was there some kind of metamorphosis type process for you, or transformation or transmutation of energies from one perspective to the other?
I went from pursuing that, I wouldn't say dream. That would be a false statement. Back then, I would call it dream. Now I'll call it illusion or idea. Back then, it was all about the hair, the partying, the traveling, all that. It's not that anymore. I was totally coming from emptiness, lack. Now, when I play music, it's all about passion. Though I was passionate then, that passion was moving through a filter of absolute ego. Now when I do it, my bandmates and I, some of the different bands I play in as well, we call it digging in. After about 4 or 5 songs and we get settled, we just hunker down and we start letting God begin to move through you. And things begin to happen that you can never create in a band rehearsal, ever, 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 ever. When that spirit begins to move through 4 or 5 people, all the bandmates know. It's kind of like we ascend to another place where the tree begins to root itself into all different players. That's how it feels to me now as opposed to then. And the effect it has on people who come to see the bands that I'm with, as you mentioned a moment ago. The effect is a profound.
Yeah, it kind of ripples out.
Let's go hear a cool rock band too. Wow. And you can
would you say that it was almost meditative when you get into that state, and then it begs the question, if it's a meditative experience and you're all feeling the vibe and you're all seeing it or feeling it as a godlike ascension, then would you say that your band members are also of the same mind, where this is a spiritual type expression of creative energy? And was that always the same for all the bands you played in, or did you evolve into that?
To answer the first part of the question, my bandmates now, we also call it the zone. The zone, that's a magical place. Why are football players trying to get into the zone? Race car drivers, it's not about how fast you can drive. They're all driving as fast as they can. They're getting into the zone. So when we get into that zone, there's an ecstasy of bliss. My bandmates now, we know what it's like when we are there. Mm-hmm. Some of them come from a different religious faith than I do, or spiritual background. Some of them are Christians. Some of them are whatever they are. They may not see it from that perspective, but I absolutely guarantee they know when they are in it. One of my most, quote, famous bands here in Memphis, Tennessee, was a band, Acoustic Power Trio. It was an acoustic band, myself, a couple of the guys, the bass player for Jefferson Starship, Jeff Adams, has played with Survivor and many other people. Bill Marshall from Hank Williams Jr.'s drummer. This band was magic. We would do Eagles vocals, Little River Band, Crosby, Stills and Nash kind of power acoustic. Yeah, we call it digging in, call it getting into the zone. And when you're in that space, to answer your question, yes, it is meditative, but it's not just being in a light meditative state. You are ascended into a very deep meditative state. Conscious you are, but the energy that begins to happen is it's this blast of light.
Yeah, it's like a synergy. I mean, I think being an artist for myself, I think that creative process is part of being in that zone. It's like if you're not in the zone, there's something that doesn't come out in that space. When you are in the zone, there's something very legitimate that comes out into that space. If it's one thing I wish I could teach, I could teach it, but it would be how to contain that. But people often ask me, where do I start? I always tell them meditation. And I'm talking about the meditation where you're just clearing your mind of thoughts or going out in nature and vibing with the frequency of nature. And the second thing would be to find your own creative process, whatever that process is. An artist has a process no matter what their medium is. And even in the form of producing a radio show or playing in a band, there's a creative process involved, some level of creative process. And I liken it to kind of the steps that our soul takes, our spirit takes to get us in that move, get us in the groove, get us in that feeling of creativity so that we can actually create something out of that space. Or we could distract ourselves with drama. Or we could, not do it.
And that's fun too. It is. I mean,
is it fun?
Drama's fun. I love it like everybody else. But there's a different place that exists, and it's there for the individuals choosing.
It's there for a teaching process. And I think drama, as ridiculous as it is, has a place in human evolution. It has a place in consciousness, or it wouldn't exist, just like ego has a place in consciousness as well. When you talk to me about your story, it's like you talk about the story of the prioritizing of the ego. It's not necessarily that you get rid of it, but you prioritize it into a manageable place within
a usable place.
A useful place, a place where you can actually assist in your ascension, assist in your evolution. I think that's been a dupe in the New Age movement. I think we are way too consumed with pointing the finger at other people and saying, that's ego. Every time you say that to somebody, I don't know, it's kind of like a mirror. If you project and you say that and you say, well, your ego, I mean, every place I've ever learned anything spiritual has always said that what we see, we are in a sense. So if somebody is seeing another person as an egotistical maniac, well, then maybe they have some egotistical issues they need to go reflect on. Whatever it is, what it is, right? But I think and feel really, really strongly, it's like you need your ego to function on some levels. I do believe that. It's just about being accessible to the higher minds within you, and how you navigate those higher minds and how you bridge them back into the 3D physical everyday world of working and raising families and making dinner and doing your everyday things. And you're just keeping it all balanced. I mean, it feels kind of sticky to me when we see in the New Age movement people pointing the fingers at each other saying, oh, they're way too ego. And they all go, oh, yeah, I know exactly what that means.
So is that judgment you just made.
So I kind of feel like I feel really, strongly about that. It's like, you guys, come on, the psychology that we have been brought up in, to this point today, I believe is an outdated psychology. I don't believe it includes paranormal incidences, telepathic abilities, psychic qualities, intuitive wisdom. I think you can find some branches through the traditional psychology, but I think what we need is more of a quantum psychology. How do we relate to each other quantumly?
We have grown.
Yeah, we who ponder those questions, we who talk about those questions, stir the meme and put it out there into the world, and we have an ability to have a conversation about it and get people thinking, and it just kind of goes from there. And maybe someday somebody will be born whose purpose and fate in this world is to actually bring and birth that out, just like Freud was. Or we base so much of who we are on, I believe, outdated concepts that really just have no use anymore in the world that we have today.
Yesterday's newspaper.
Yeah, and I talk about this a lot, and I talk about this in all my shows. It's like we have a digital interaction with the world now that we didn't have even 10, 15, 20 years ago. And so, the kids are growing up with different ideas of what it means to connect. Why haven't you returned my text? Didn't you see my Snapchat? I saw the post you made on Facebook. I know all about your life based on Facebook. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But it's also something very, very concerning, and it's something that we have to address. How would you advise, because you're a father, you have a son, right? You have a son, and how old is he?
I do. He's almost 11. He'll be 11 in May.
So he's preteen years, right?
Yeah.
So how are you going to deal with that as a father? Someone who knows what it's like to be in the ego, to go through the wants and the desires, and then to get on the other side of that, have the spiritual elevation and wisdom. how would you advise your son to move into the world in an empowered male energy? How are you raising him to do that? If you don't mind me asking.
Not at all. My son, when he was born, when the doctor presented him to me, he said, "Mr. Blanchard, look at this." And I was split in half, as I'm sure most of you know. And I heard higher self say, "You will never have trouble with this child ever." To answer your question, I teach my child the truth. I don't hide anything from him. I teach him about explicit words, teach him the reason why people use them, the applications of them.
What do you say about that specifically?
That there's a consequence. You live in a world where you're interacting with other people who can be offended. And if you choose at any point to use such powerful tools, expect a powerful response. And so, but when I speak to my son, and I always get on my knees, to make myself down to his level. And as I'm speaking to him, if the TV's on and he deviates towards the TV, I just turn his chin to mine and I start all over. So I can always turn the TV off, but I want him to learn to focus without an excuse of why he needs to focus. Excuse me. And so I'm real with him. I don't sugarcoat it. I explain to him there is no right and wrong. All there is consequence of choice. He understands it. He gets it, because I'm not playing overlord to him to where I'm towering over him 3 feet and he has to look at this parenting God control his life. I'm empowering. People tell me all the time, "Oh, just wait till he becomes a teenager." I'm like, you will never, ever sell me with that bullcrap story, ever. I will never buy into it, ever. I'm empowering him now, and he gets it.
Mm. Well, I agree with that. And I think that we're raising different species of humans. I think we have ascended masters returning in our kids. We have autistic gene altering type instances happening where, the children are being born with different genomes, technically. I mean, it's all over the place. We could talk about that for the whole show, really. And what it then does is it asks parenting to be completely different. And it's not the parents' world where it was back in the 1950s or the 40s. We're dealing with a completely different paradigm. I contributed to a book by Dr. Karen Goody back in 2009 called Kids Who See Ghosts. And one of the prefaces of the book was all about what do you do when your kids have these heightened sensitive type psychic abilities, and how do you raise them so that you don't shut that down. And so what I hear you telling me is you're teaching your son about the importance of words and the words that come out of his mouth and what that engages energetically. And I commend you for that, because if we were all taught that from the beginning, we would have very clear throat chakras and we would all be able to say what we mean. And you were just telling me before the show, Hillary, I got to give it to you because you just say it the way it is. Right?
That's right.
I'm paraphrasing a little bit.
You have great punch. You're ballsy. You have no problem delivering a message, no matter what vibration, tone, or intention. You have that gift.
I'm always authentic to myself. I stay loyal to myself and my feelings and the things that are brewing on in me. I spent way too many years ignoring my intuition and worrying about what other people would think. And so for me, that was a lesson to grow out of that and then to practice the redevelopment and the reprogramming of that, because a lot of, I struggled with it. A lot of people struggle with it. Saying what you mean is probably, to me, one of the most authentic signatures anyone can leave. Because if you're even remotely psychic or remotely sensitive to energy, you're always going to know when somebody is not saying what they mean, right? So when your son comes to you and says, "Yeah, I'm fine," but inside he's, a thunderstorm and he's raging inside, tell me you can't tell that.
Correct.
Right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So if your partner comes to you and is, "Oh, everything is fine," but inside it's not, you can tell that, right?
Yeah.
So I always say to people, how come you don't just say what's on your mind and tell people what's wrong? and just do it in a way that gets it on the table. But again, I'm an Aries, so I'm very blunt and go right in and bulldoze right into the topic. So maybe that serves me well in my career. However, I always tell people it doesn't make any sense. It creates a conflicting energetic signature. You have something coming out of your mouth that does not match the truth of what's inside of you. And lying and telling secrets are the same thing. So when you're dealing with kids who are growing up to become teenagers, I have 2 teenagers, and you're going to be dealing with situations that aren't necessarily, ideal for mom and dad. You got to be able to understand your child well enough to know when they're telling the truth versus when they're not, because sometimes their lives depend on it.
Absolutely.
We just got a notice today from my kids' school that a student had committed suicide yesterday. So it's a big, relevant thing going on right now in my children's world. And they're wrapping their heads around, why somebody would do that, or what are the consequences? Why didn't they just talk to somebody? So it's actually a really good situation. And I'm very thankful that they're okay with talking to me about it. I've raised them to be very open men. To talk about their feelings, to not hide it, or stuff it down, or pretend that it's okay. And the conversation is really raw and authentic and real. And then we have it, and then we all move on after the conversation, and we're all okay. Whereas if we stuff it in and don't deal with it, or ignore the conversation, or run away from it, it creates all this ridiculousness and drama. It creates drama, Keith. And I think we need to move into a better world without drama. No drama would mean a better world.
Totally agree. No drama equals better world.
Right? We should make a bumper sticker. No drama equals better
world. Absolutely. And another thing my son has, as far as the power of words, and and to always be truthful with your words, if something's bothering him, like that thunderstorm, is he understands absolutely through and through consequence of choice with words, with physical action. He gets that. He understands that everything I think. He also understands that everything I think, even though I don't know I'm thinking it, is going to happen to me. That creates a huge disciplinary. You no longer have to discipline your child. They know, not that I might go to jail, or I might get spanked, or might get punished work from school. I know I am going to have to face this karma, this reap what you sow, this reap what comes around goes around. I'm going to have to see the other side of myself by the choices I make in my life.
Yeah, my kids grew up through the Montessori method, which I really appreciate. And looking back on it now, realize it was the right choice for us. And when we were making that choice, one of the relevant topics that we were considering at the time was, does traditional school provide the opportunity for free thinking? And the answer to that was no. The indoctrination that we go through in a traditional public school system is really more about a pounding of information so that we memorize facts and trivial type things.
Yes.
More than it is about creating an inquisitive mind or questioning mind. It's more about, don't question this. This is right. And I reject that completely. I'm a non-compliant person when it comes to that. And I'm a non-compliant person with my kids. So I put them into the Montessori method because it was more about them finding their way to information or things that they enjoy studying and learning about, because they're naturally drawn to that. It brings out their own gifts of whatever that is, versus being part of the number system and coming out in the rows, marching like a bunch of robots. I really think that I think one of the things that will have to happen in a new paradigm, if we are to become more of a sustainable culture globally or not, we have to rethink our education system and unlearn a lot of the things that we have learned, because it's not right. It's just one of those things where it's kind of like, you have to spend 20-something years of your life going to school, fighting the peer pressure, dealing with the programming. You get out of it to go to college, doing it for another 4 years, technically. Then you get out of that and you realize, wow, a lot of that doesn't make sense. or you just really push what you've been told and you keep doing that until you pass on, and that's your life.
Yes.
So what do you tell your son when it comes to finding his passion and manifesting that in a way that feeds his soul versus dents it or hurts it?
First, I'd like to resound something that you said about the educational system needs to change. Instead of children learning the way they teach, they should teach the way children learn. I agree. That thing is going to turn over on its head. Pray to God, if you hear me now. That is going to change really, really soon. Because as you said, when they get out of college and they were pounded, they have no sense of self except what they learned in college, and they're not happy. I got to go be a lawyer. I got to go be a doctor. I got to go do this. When the other is true, and now to answer the second part of your question, is when you impregnate your child, teach your child, if God is love, call it whatever you like. If your highest path is love, again, it makes sense to me. When you do what you love, your life unfolds with effortless ease and abundance, prosperity, affluence, wealth. All that becomes a natural response to being connected to that which is everywhere in everything. You are no longer separated from the universal abundance. And so I tell my son, I hope that you play with as many ideas right now as you can that you want to do. But no matter what you choose, I will always support you in it to the hilt, but I will support you infinitely when I know it's something that's you're aligned with and that will bring you the absolute joy that you deserve.
Oh, it sounds so easy. It sounds so easy, but sometimes it's challenging, and we come across these challenges that we all have. And I really want to hit this home, is that we can never judge other people for challenges. Everybody's challenges belong to them, and they have lessons in all the facets of what's involved. And who are we to say you don't get to learn that? You know, who are we to say, let's take that away from you and you don't have to learn that? Or let's tell you what's wrong with you so that you don't have to go through.
Fix you.
I mean, really, it's almost a spiritual arrogance. It's almost like there's a difference between being given, permission to work with somebody and to work through those. And I do sessions with people. I do one-on-one work with people. And I would never approach a person who has not given me permission to go into that space and do that work to that level or that degree. It's like I think people have forgotten that we need permission to look into other people or stare into their soul. I've done a lot of work in the southwestern part of the United States, and I've worked with elders and I've worked with people of different cultures. They have a completely different way of approaching people. And I was so thankful that I learned how to do it, because it changed my perspective on how I was approaching the elderly or people who have more experience than me in different things. I mean, sometimes you have to wait and be given permission to even be given information. I mean, you could show up at an elder's house and they would just talk about the weather for the whole time you're there, and then you leave. They're not going to give you anything if they feel like you're there to just pick their brain, take all the information out of them, and then run off with it to go do something for yourself. There has to be a chemistry and understanding and opening, if you will. I think we need that in conversation. There's an art to conversation. And when there's an opening for a topic to come up or for something to be said, we have to take that opening, but we have to take it in a way that doesn't bulldoze somebody else or, cross their boundaries. And there has to be respect. And if there's no respect, then we have a problem. Houston, we have a problem. So if we have a problem, we have to learn quickly how to overcome that problem. And the art of conversation is something I think a lot of us need to relearn. Because it's not so much about sitting across from somebody, looking into them and telling them everything that's wrong with them or everything that you see, unless the person says, Keith, what do you see that's wrong with me? What's wrong with me, Keith? Then you could tell me what's wrong with me. or you ask me for that for yourself. But you don't just come out and start offering up advice unless you're being given permission to operate. That's I think number one. And that's worked with my kids. It's like if I walk into my kids' rooms and I demand to know information, it comes off really bad. If I walk in and I, hi, how's your day going? And lead into the question, the conversation goes much better. And you get more of a genuine, authentic response from the person that you're dealing with, and it leads to something more beautiful and more enlightened than if you were to be more standoffish, more confrontational, more I already have this all figured out, and you're not open to any kind of ping pong. We were talking about ping pong earlier and how we have conversations and it's like a ping pong table, it goes back and forth. And if I'm just nailing you with the ball, or I just put my paddle down and say, I'm not even going to play with you anymore. How fun is that? I mean, it's like, we kind of have to find our rhythm. Speaking our truth, being authentic, and aren't these all divine principles that anchor heaven to earth? It's like we bring down these practical elements into our life and apply spiritual knowledge to them. Then the practical then becomes spiritual, and we find a whole nother level of understanding for ourselves and other people. Yeah. How does that work for you? I mean, talk to me about that. What do you think?
Totally. I all I can do is agree with everything you said. Ping pong, Hillary, one thing that I've discovered with my child, closing off the story about kids, I made a decision long time ago, not that I'm brute force over my kid, but I am your father. End of story. It's not with this arrogance. It's not with this power trip. I come from a space inside that I made a choice to be a parent. I am your dad. I don't care if you're 40 years old, you do something stupid, I'm going to approach you as if you were 10 years old, and I'm going to still be your father, not because you're 21 years old and now you're legal. That doesn't work with me. And in that shift, I've noticed something miraculous happen with my child. When I speak to him, he hears me as a guide, not my daddy or my father. He knows that I'm a lifeline in his life. I see it powerfully. I see it effortlessly because I made an honest decision, a real decision that I'm never going to leave you. I tell my kid at least 25, 30, 40, whatever times a day that I love him. And I make sure he's looking me in the eyes when I do it. And this kind of power impregnating into another human being is amazing. But to answer your question more definitively about something that I experience to this day with other people, when I meet someone, for example, I'm out in a nightclub playing music and I'm on break. And of course, everybody wants to talk to the bandmates, and I equally want to talk with them. Though we never met, you are my friend. You can bet your sweet bottom on that. I will get to know you in a matter of moments. I will feel comfortable enough to start digging in your food bag and basket and start eating. That's me. But when I meet someone, as I'm shaking their hand, I'll pay attention to the grip of the handshake, the musicalness or the tone of their voice, the quality of the voice, the dialect of their voice, their beautiful hair, the color of their eyes, their physical attribute, whatever it may be that is an attribute of God that is obvious to me that I'm seeing in this experience with this person. I begin to massage that inside of myself, and I begin to appreciate it, and I begin to salivate over it. And I find myself of really oohing and ahhing over this one attribute of this person. Without fail, God steps out of this person, right out of them in front of my face, and begins to materialize. When I say materialize, does it mean that God manifests? Yeah, I'm serious. I mean that. It manifests because you see the whole being change. They're lighting up because on some conscious level, they understand what you're doing and that they know that you're appreciating by the look in your eyes and how you're nodding your head when they're talking to you. I see metamorphosis happen right in front of my face, and profound healing begins to happen just like that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, it's like authentically seeing somebody as a reflection of God or holy space completely changes your interaction.
Holy space, sacred space. Thank you very much.
Think about it. I think that's probably one of the most profound things that we've talked about so far, this show. if you walk up to somebody and you see them as anything else, doesn't that completely change the interaction?
I know it all too well.
Well, I mean, think about it. Oh, man, that could change the whole world. People just started seeing each other as divine beings and being grateful to be in their presence versus defensive or snotty or, you know, finding everything wrong. I don't like her face. I don't like her hair. I don't like anything. I don't like him. Shut up. Just shut up.
You know, I've always said,
I mean, we are responsible people. Or we are responsible for our thoughts, and we are responsible for our energy, and we are responsible for what we bring to the table when we interact with anything, whether it's a human being, an animal, a tree, an idea. We are responsible for how we interact with that, and we can be a million zillion different possibilities in what that is. Dismissive. We can be dramatic, we can be gossipy, we can be brilliant, we can be angels, we can be people that come to the table and say, oh my God, you're the most amusing thing ever. Hello, thank you for existing. Thank you for existing. I mean, just life itself. And I mean, other than that, I think everything else is just a waste of your time. Talk about the beautiful things. Talk about the things that inspire you. Talk about the things that are synchronistic between the two of you, and move from there and see what kind of magical wonderfulness comes out of that. That's what I say. Why do anything else? I think now at this point in my age, Keith, doing anything else is a waste of my time. It's a waste of my time. I've been saying no to more things lately than I've been saying yes, because I want to focus my energy into the things that I want to do with the full force of what that means. And I don't want to spread myself thin doing 20 different things just to do it, where I can do 2 of those 20 things, or maybe 1 or 2 or a couple, and pour my energy into that and make it something really well worth doing. And I think you get more of you in that. You get more of, instead of being drained across the board and trying to do this, and this, and say, I went through that. So I know what that's like. I did that early on in my career. It was perhaps necessary at the time, but now I say no. Saying no to things is a powerful thing. What's the most powerful thing you can think of that you've said no to and you were happy with the no? Do you remember?
No.
Anything come up? You have any powerful no's?
Wow, that's such a good question. You just stumped me. A powerful no.
What's your most powerful no experience?
I honestly don't have one. At least it's not coming to mind.
Wow.
When it does show up in this conversation, I'll let you know.
Well, get back to me on that. I'm going to follow up on that. So you have a poster here of Sai Baba in the background. I'm curious what your story is with him. Yes.
This guy back here, also this guy on my arm, I'm going to get this tattoo finished sometime soon. 1997-ish. I was further enough along my spiritual path to where I was teaching a class, Spirituality 101. And at the end of this class, a friend of mine by the name of Paul came up to the podium where I was sharing my discourse. And we began to have dialogue and find out how each other was doing, because we hadn't seen each other in a while. And we start talking about this wall. They had a wall over here full of pictures of divine beings, Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, Mother Teresa, Gandhi, and the like. And so the last one in the lot was Satya Sai Baba. But I didn't know his name at the time. And I said, well, who is this cat? And he said, well, Keith, this man is Satya Sai Baba. Satya means truth. Sai meaning mother. Baba, like Abba in the Bible, means father. So this man is a full incarnation of God energy. Well, he explains to me, and I said, well, what's his mission? What's his fame? He said, well, he picks up a canister, says, Keith, you see the ash in this canister? I said, yes. He says, this actually materialized out of this man's hand. And I was hooked. I wanted all the information. This man does not write books. He's way beyond that. People write books about him, skeptics who go over there because they hear all this hype and this noise. They're the ones coming back after trying to debunk this, going, I don't know what that is. And they're writing all these books. And out of all the books I've read about the life of Bhagavan Sri Satya Sai Baba, the people who wrote about him, there's a resounding theme, and that's Sai Baba told me, because they had a personal interview. Can you imagine having a one-on-one interview with a fully blown God-conscious man? They said that if I come to you in a dream, you're not dreaming, I'm actually present, we are having an experience. Well, I started having an experience with Satya Sai Baba. One night, after about a year or so into my ongoing, mind you, more conscious and lucid, I'd say as now, if not more so, than I am here, he brings me to a state of full-blown consciousness by tapping me on my spiritual leg. And he's standing across the river, and he begins to talk to me telepathically. And I'm elated because my teacher, my beloved master, is showing himself to me. And he says, stand up, Keith, get off your knees, make yourself equal to me, which I absolutely adored about him.
Powerful experience.
It all comes flooding back. She says, I want you to come see me in India, Keith. I said, wow, yay, how will I do this? When will I go? How will I get there? He goes, Keith. You need to put aside all of your disbelief and fear and doubt. I got the ticket. Come to India and put your feet on Indian soil. Do this for me. So I wake up in the morning, excited. Is this really going to happen? You know what? I'm going to let this go. And I released it. What I am telling you, I'm about to tell the listening audience now, viewing audience, is absolutely true in my son's life. Give or take 2 or 3 weeks, I get a phone call from a person I've never met. Hi, Keith, my name is Debbie. Hi, Debbie, what can I do for you? Keith, we have a mutual friend. Word got to me that you want to go to India to see a holy man that came to you in a dream. I said, yes, ma'am, this is true. She said, Keith, I'm a flight attendant. And I got some companion passes for the year that are about to expire. And I really would not like that to happen. No, you want to go on a pilgrimage. Can I give you a first-class round-trip ticket? 3 months later, I jet across the ocean to India to experience this 5'1" little man perform miracles in front of my face, change the weather, changed my life, completely changed my life. Because it helped me. Before I went to India, he was all about my teacher. And even though I knew that I am God or I am divine at my essence, I still use my humility to take in how God walks, talks, acts, and behaves. And he was my excuse for that. When I got to the ashram and experienced the divinity of this man, which his aura engulfs the ashram, it is truly, I can't, and I won't soil it by using words. It was so divine that when I got back, it engulfed me. It was everything. I was imbued with light. And so much so, I was informationally pregnant. I couldn't take it anymore. It's like eating cheesecake, 4 or 5 good bites. You know, it's still good and divine and luscious and decadent. Yeah. I had enough. It's too rich. Yeah. But that's part of my experience with Sai Baba. But when I got back, it still has a sacred space for me, by all means. When I see him in dreamscape or a picture or thinking of him, my heart does melt from my teacher. But it's no longer about him. And as you said, it's now about me, and not in an ego-driven way, but using my ego, that part of myself, as a catalyst to bring about what I want into this world, because you cannot drive a car without ego. So or you can't have a body without ego, because if you would, then you wouldn't be ego, you'd be pure spirit. There'd be no reason to incarnate. Maybe
it's not ego either. We kind of jumped on that word from psychology.
By the way, this is honey I'm eating to help stop me from coughing because I've been ill. So thank you for your patience.
Well, it brings in the goddess of the bees and the honey and all the healing wonderfulness of that. So thank you for bringing that energy with you. I guess one of the things that I've learned too in my life is that when we have a spiritual teacher for a time or a lifetime, however long we have them in our life, at some point we outgrow them. There's a point, I think, where we're always students in some ways. right? We're always teaching and we're always students, no matter what we do. We're always teaching something and we're always learning something. But being underneath a teacher or, as an apprentice, I mean, you graduate from that at some point, and then you go out into the world and you put to use the things that you have learned. Way too often, I see a lot of people get stuck in the apprentice groupie-ship. I call it a groupie-ship because it is okay. And they chase their teachers around like little robots, and it's all about their teacher. It's all about their teacher. It's all about their teacher. We serve the teacher. And it's almost like a brainwashing type cult-like energy. Yeah. Unless you don't do that. If you don't do that and you take what you've learned from the teacher and you move it out. I mean, I've broken away from spiritual teachers. I mean, and not, some of it's been dramatic and some of it's been very appropriate. It's time for me to go on and do my own work in the world, to embrace what I've learned and how I've learned it, and to put it to use, just like you have. And so for those watching, I want you to understand that it's perfectly okay to have spiritual teachers. We have spiritual teachers all the time in a lot of our interactions when we're working underneath a spiritual teacher as an apprentice or a student. Don't get caught and addicted to that role. Don't get codependent. Get co-creative. And if your teacher doesn't want to be co-creative with you, or I've seen some pretty famous teachers go down the poop hole over there because they don't want their students to grow up past them or do things. They get very, very, I don't know, what's the word? Controlling over the flock type thing. So they don't want that seeded or impregnated into other minds that, hey, go off and do your own thing, because there's money involved and there's other stuff involved. So, I mean, it gets a little bit complicated and murky, and here's my advice. Once it gets dramatic, leave. I mean, the eagles get kicked out of the nest for a reason, so that they learn how to fly, right? So if you don't get kicked out of the nest, or you don't leave the nest on your own, you end up not spreading your wings and not learning how to fly. So what was your eagle moment, Keith, when you were realizing that this man is your teacher, he is your spirit, you love him, you're devoted to him, but I need to be me and be out in the world, and it's not about being devoted to another human being. What was your eagle moment where you felt like you made that shift?
Understanding that revering a teacher is all about humility, bowing, reverent. That is a master key. That's how it started for me. That was my vehicle for touching the divine within myself, using Satya Sai Baba as the excuse. My next stepping stone, my next landmark, was when I was in India on the ashram. I'm sitting in, this temple is made of gold. The ceilings are made of gold from Thailand. On a slow day, there is 35,000 people there to experience this little 5'1" man just walk among the multitude. And at a certain time of the morning, before Satya Sai Baba comes out, they ring this gold bell. And immediately, listen to this, 35,000+ people go into a 21 Om chant. It's amazing. And then I was lucky to discover, thanks to being led there by Spirit, this little room that sits in the heart of the Kuwant Hall, which is the main temple where everybody else sits. And they only allow 40 people in, women on one side, 20 men on the other side. Little did I know, in this room is the holiest of holy things. Picture of Sai Baba, his first incarnation, this present incarnation, life-size chariot statue of Horus, of Arjuna, sacred stuff. I mean, like really sacred stuff that very few eyes have ever seen. When I got into this place, I could see, but it was fuzzy. And I thought maybe it's because of the lighting. It was because I was not clear enough to be in such a sacred space. And then when they started doing that chant of 35,000+ people doing Om, little did I know that this temple was designed like a tuning fork. And all of that energy from that mantra goes into this room, and you begin to vibrate. And I'm talking about seriously vibrate. I was vibrating at such a high frequency, my body melted off of my essence. And I was sitting there in my essence, not body conscious. And I was just sitting, as you would see an illumined Buddha, just an absolute ecstasy and bliss. And it only lasted for about 45 seconds, sadly. But it was powerful enough to still be with me for the rest of my life. But after the mantra and that, as soon as it's over, they usher you out. But soon as the mantra was over and I was slowly starting to congeal, I could see everything in the room with absolute clarity. And that was a monumental shifting point for me to see that my godness, my godhood, my divinity, not only in the form of intellect, but truly having experience.
So it was a very profound experience for you.
Yes.
Yeah. And then when now you still study underneath him, or do you no longer study underneath him technically?
He passed, coincidentally, synchronistically, Easter morning, 2011. I know so much about him, and it's like knowing the lyrics to Hotel California. You no longer have to read it off of the album to know what they're saying. I know so much about him. I know him through and through. It's more of just a constant, beautiful reminder for me when I see a post or a quote of his. That's where it stands with me now.
So you took your experience working with him, working with his teachings, what he represents to you, and you applied it to your own work by writing your books and going through a spiritual awakening, which is all really good thing. I mean, we all need some kind of figure like that, whether it's a famous figure or not. So for me, it was my grandmother. It was
Lovely.
a family figure. My grandfather too. So, and I've worked with spiritual teachers, but I've never really stayed within like the long-term eternal plan where you're there forever. And that's just the way it is with some people. And I respect it. I mean, everybody has to make their own decisions. It comes down to free will and choice and what you're willing to say yes and no to, right?
Yeah.
So what are you up to now? What are you doing now? You have done a bunch of different things with some books and some teachings, and you play guitar and you do all these great things. What are you working on now?
Well, as you and I spoke about in the video green room, like you, I think I'm in an incubate stage. Just this incubancy of just doing nothing that could change by the time we're done with this interview. But I'm in a very slow period right now. The last major project I've done was about 4 months ago. Came out of a night's sleep, looking for a creative project, be it write a book or make a website or add this or whatever it may be. And I had the insight to make a movie. I'm like, make a movie? Really? And so I sat down, opened up my video and audio software, grabbed some of the dialogue from my books, The Divine Principle, as well as For the Love of God, which is about my journey to South India to Seaside Bible, which I brought a tape recorder. So I created a script and got on YouTube and found, Google, and found some Google images, and on YouTube and found some videos that coincide and relate to the message being given. And I made this movie called And the Meek Shall Inherit the Earth, The Prophecy Realized. My gig for the rest of my life is about the unification of humanity. And I will stop at nothing until that is achieved as far as my contribution to that. And it's about the bringing togetherness of white people, black people, green people, brown people. Stop the bitching, stop the argument, look at yourself. Even though you think that what you're doing might be counter-racist or counter-racism or counter-terrorism, you have to have an understanding that your very posting on Facebook or talking about it is part of the problem. You can water the weed, or you can water the plant. And either one you give your attention to is the one that will grow. And so my gig is to help educate people. I'm glad you are anti-racist. I'm glad that you are anti-terrorist. But in your anti-nism, check yourself, because you could still be doing that thing under a different guise. And so the movie And the Meek Shall Inherit the Earth is about empowering people with information, stuff with like Einstein or Tesla and universal truths, as well as just what's happening in the world and just educating people through that. And if you're interested in watching that movie, go to KeithAnthonyBlanchard.com or centeroflightradio.com. They're interchangeable. The very bottom of the welcoming page, you'll see a movie banner. Click on it, you're good to go. It's about 45 to 50 minutes long.
Great. What a great project. I don't know. I have to disagree with you on one thing to do with that. I think people talking about the anti stuff gives an opposite energy to the pro stuff. So if somebody is talking about how much they hate a race of people, and then somebody else counters that with how much they love other races of people, in the balancing of the scales, I think it does play out some kind of balancing effect. I do know what you mean, though, when people aren't really clear about the connection to that. I think you have to be very careful how you word that, how you act that out, how you do that, because it can be easily tied into the same kind of energy like you were speaking of. Yeah. But I come from a background, my line of work really has to do with talking about the things a lot of people don't like to talk about, or bringing up the tougher subjects, or bringing up the things that people are, I'm a little uncomfortable talking about that. Great, let's talk about it. I don't really want to. Well, that's fine. But if you're on a show and you're making a statement, or you're posting information about it, let's talk about it. Let's have an adult conversation about it. I don't know. I think there's usefulness to that. It's just all in how you handle it.
Yeah, agreed. And that comes back to, a lot of things that are happening in the world. And we, as many in the viewing audience, light workers, to use a word that was been coined, we're trying to be that so the vibration can lift. But what's always with me is the things that are happening in the world, there is leftover energy from leftover lifetimes applying to everyone across the board, everywhere. So I've learned to develop the posture. And I think this is a fantastic expanding exercise. As if you can imagine, I'm no longer a human being. I'm just a ghost. Just a ghost. I can see the world. That's all I can do. I can't per se interact. Can't suggest things to people. I just want to observe. There is such an amazing growth in awareness that happens for a person if they try this exercise, because you're no longer using your mouth, which is distracting. Now you're using your entire peripheral of senses. And when you can engage your peripheral self, even though I'm looking at the camera, I see the light, I hear the air conditioner, I see the microphone stand that you can't, I see it. When you can begin to play in this kind of arena, your light spreads that far because you are your awareness. Your awareness is the light. And I think that's really how we make a difference, by just holding it down, holding that vibration down.
You ever hear of spooky action at a distance?
I'm sorry, say again?
Have you ever heard of spooky action at a distance?
I did not. Enlighten me.
It's this thing in physics. I don't have it in front of me, so it's going to be kind of like a rehash of it. There's a really, really great couple of links. I'll send you some. And for those listening, please Google it. Spooky action at a distance.
All right.
In physics, it claims, in quantum physics, it claims that the actual act of observation changes particles from wave emanation forms to particles.
That's right.
Strictly from the act of observation.
That's right.
And it changes it all the way back to the beginning creation of it, which means that it's one of the things in physics that can actually go back in time. It transcends the time-space continuum. So therefore, I've been using this a lot lately. So when you see something or you observe, would you do what you just described? When you observe something, you're actually in one of your most powerful states, because you're literally changing particles. You're literally engaging the physics of the world and changing it back to the original point of creation. I mean, hello, we all, for everybody who wants to have these divine qualities and you want to go watch a zillion YouTubes on ancient history and the Babylonians and, the different cultures that harnessed supposed, alternative technology and were so much more profound than we are, so they say. I disagree with that on some level. I think that we have come tremendously far. Yeah. I give the human race a lot more credit than most people do. And I think that we all have this incredible potential to realize the power of that. So let's say, for example, Keith, we're talking about a situation. Okay, let's talk about this from a psychological perspective. If we're talking about a challenge, let's say you're having a challenge, Keith. Give me a challenge. Let's mock this conversation. Let's just role play. Give me a challenge, or give me a real challenge that you're going through right now.
I don't want to jinx anything. Everything's so wonderful right now in my life. I'm shrinking. Money challenges.
Money challenges.
Yeah.
Okay. So the minute we talk about the money challenges and you give me a little more information and suddenly you have an aha moment. I call the aha moments those anchor observant points. Because the aha moment is like, I see it, right? So then doesn't that change your emanation of anti-abundance or abundance problem to something else? And then you instantaneously change it back all the way to source. How hopeful is that? I mean, that's very hopeful. I see that as a hopeful thing.
Yes.
From a shamanic standpoint, soul retrieval would be a perfect example of this workings. Spooky action at a distance within quantum physics actually scientifically explains soul retrieval in some shamanic cultures.
So soul retrieval meaning going back to your essence and bringing it here?
You're going back. You're going
pulling yourself back?
Yeah, you're going back into an etheric space, looking for something root wounded, most likely root wound related. You find it, you see it, and then all of a sudden you have a legitimate shift in your entire being because you have literally changed something back in time. So I've been contemplating this, and I said spooky action at a distance really does explain this kind of in a scientific terms, because with our consciousness, with our mind, with our spirit, with the help of maybe a shaman or a practitioner or somebody that is holding that space for us, we're observing this kind of movement back into our woundage. This is just an example. And then the minute we have the aha moment and we say, oh, there it is.
Yeah.
It changes. And we create those waves of emotion, those waves of energy that are completely, have capsulated us in this energy, have shifted. It's beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful things, and I'm fascinated by it. So I think that what it does is it gives everybody hope. It tells me that the power of the observation is a divine quality. It's almost like a godlike quality. We have the power to be able to observe ourselves and others, and so if you observe me, don't you then in fact change me from emanations to particles and vice versa, right? If I'm observing you,
yeah, absolutely.
Therefore, you're changing those emanations into particles. I don't know how further you could take that, but to me it seems like, when we hold witness for each other, or one of us is going through a challenge, the minute that, if you're holding space and somebody's talking to you about a challenge or something they're going through, just in observing that by being sacred witness, you don't necessarily have to even say a word or fix anything. It's not really about that. But just in holding the witness, you're observing, and therefore you're helping to change and transform the energy.
Absolutely.
How come we don't teach this to our kids?
To me, it's primordial. It's a primordial lesson. It is the base. It should be the first brick that you put in your house that you build. It is, when you said it's so amazing, it's really amazing when you realize that you have this power. And when we utilize that power correctly, we can change the world. We can change it. What motivated me once I learned about this path was to realize that I can have any and everything I've ever wanted once I become clear and I can focus. Back to, you can water the weed or the plant. So you have a weed and a plant, and they both absolute potential, so they're waves. So I decide I'm going to water the plant. And as you're doing, you're grabbing that thought, that wave, and beginning to make it a particle by solidifying, by giving it your attention. And therefore, it becomes a manifestation and blooms, blossoms, and grows and expresses itself and becomes, there's a potential of many more flowers in the one flower that you grew initially. We are creators. That's what we do.
Yeah.
We do it by default. We might as well get with the program.
That's right. I do see there are medicinal purposes to weeds. I think, and I have to say this because I'm a plant person, and you know this about me. So when people tell me that there's weeds and then there's flowers, I say, they're all useful. Because my grandmother's favorite flower was goldenrod, and everyone hates goldenrod because goldenrod gives off all these allergies for everybody. So really, but there's medicinal uses that we just aren't taught. So I just had to say that. That was kind of one of my things. There's that word, the weed. All these plants have purposes. And that's kind of symbolic for humanity. It's like there really is no waste of human expression. No matter how bad it might seem or how dramatic, I mean, the human expression in itself is a gift, and I think that way too many times it's taken for granted, and it's if any negated in ways that just are unnecessary, and we don't have to engage. That's nice, good for you.
You don't have to engage. Very, very powerful wisdom, like I spoke about earlier. Someone attacks you, other than physical, energetically, emotionally. Just step aside. Just step aside. If you have to move your body so you can make it real, then step aside. But just metaphorically let it go, because it doesn't matter unless you grab it and make it stick. Then again, it could be potential energy that flies on by, or if you grab it and solidify it and make it a particle. It's really up to you.
I have a theory. You want to hear it?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I know that my producer is watching this show, and if he's paying attention, maybe he'll be able to find it. I want you to look up whack-a-mole. The whack-a-mole, if you can find an image of that, flash it across the screen. If not, it's okay. My sister made this. My sister told me this wisdom. Actually, it comes from my sister, my biological sister. She says, when you have things come up that are like this, you whack-a-mole it. You go to a fair. You ever been to a fair and you go to the game section and you have the whack-a-mole game where the little moles come up? And you take the big hammer thing and you whack the mole down and it comes up. Okay. It's not to say that these are all bad things or anything like that, but we all have distractions. We all have distractions that pop up. We might be, when you've written a book. So when you're sitting down to write your book, isn't it kind of, clear sometimes that you get messages from people all over the place wanting your attention, asking you questions, their phone rings, someone knocks on your door, your kids need you. It's like, what the heck? It's like, as soon as I sit down to focus on this, I have this stuff, all these moles are popping up, and you got to start whack-a-moling it. It is the best advice that my sister has ever given me, because when I have things arise that are pulling on my energy or pulling on my attention, not saying it has to be negative, it could be very positive, but it's in the moment you've dedicated that time to writing or to doing something that you need to focus your full being on. Okay. Yes. You whack-a-mole it. And you whack-a-mole it with love. You can put a little heart on the whack-a-mole thing, right? You can whack-a-mole it with love. Not right now.
Just not right now, right?
So I don't know. I think we've made a mess of things in some ways. We haven't really grasped the mastery of being able to disconnect ourselves from unnecessary energy. Yeah. I think the human race because if we had learned how to do this, or we have learned how to do this, we would see on the global collective platform a much different paradigm. And I'm talking about the military-industrial complex. I am talking about all the control systems. I'm talking about everything that engages the senses of a human being that keeps us within those control systems. Educational systems, health systems, thought, political systems, everything that keeps the human being in the role of what it is today. If we had an exponential change across the board, where we were seeing things, and I think it's starting to change. I think we were all born in the transition of the paradigm. I know that Native Americans talk about us moving from the fourth world to the fifth world. This is all the timing. We had the 2012 Mayan calendar thing happen. We've had a lot of milestones, but I just don't see it happening in a year or a day. It's like the day the calendar ended. Really? I mean, the calendar is ending. The cycles are ending. These big cycles are ending.
Yeah.
And we're on a Gregorian calendar. So the Gregorian calendar, first and foremost, is not on an actual Earth-based timing system. And I think what we're watching with climate change, and this is just my opinion, has to do more with very, very long-term cycles that the Earth goes through and a vast, perfected rebalancing system. I mean, we may very, in fact, be affecting the planet with our complete narcissism as a species and in our ability to be unable to find the balance between our capitalistic type lifestyle, our global capitalistic lifestyle, and our resources and keeping in balance. So I just think that there's this vast need that things have to change, and we have to be able to pull in a more sustainable consciousness. When I talk to my circle, my inner circle, my friends, the people that I go to for counsel and to mentor me to talk about these things, it always seems to be that, we are now the generation of teachers that are going to be teaching the younger generations how to remember our relationship with nature so we don't lose it in the digital universe that they're being raised in. Getting outside, meditating. But I also think there's more information available, so therefore it changes a lot of the access doors into how that happens, whether it's us or coming across a website or somebody's Instagram post. I mean, whatever inspires a person now is personal and individual. But I don't know. What do you think? I mean, how do you see the world going from what it is today to something else? How do you see that transition happening?
Look out and about. It's happening. That's how it's happening. It's happening just like that. And your spin, your perception, your judgment, or your lack of judgment, which I support, of whatever you think is happening, that's how it's happening. Because I don't see racism. I don't see the negativity. Yes, my heart hurts when I look out and about and I see what's going on in the Middle East, or heck, even my own city. I don't turn a blind eye. I am full of compassion. I had Patricia Cota-Robles on Center of Light Radio a month or so ago, and she supposedly, and I believe her, is in touch with the divine hierarchy. And they said, we've reached way beyond the tipping point. It is so going to happen. And the question I ask her is, so would you say that now we're just remembering how it happened? She said, that's kind of the point. So it's already happened. Reached the scale. We've tipped it. Now that we know it's going to happen, don't mean we need to be lazy and not contribute more to the happening and become the catalyst. It's happening. I see so much goodness in the world. I see an explosion of light. I'm filled with, I love what I do. I'm absolutely loving this video with you. And in fact, my body is buzzing from this. So I know I'm contributing. I love my radio show. I love that person that I told you about that I meet for the first time. It's happening. And I have no doubt about it whatsoever. I think we've achieved the point of becoming that heaven on earth prophecy. I think it's going to happen. Now, the window of when that's going to happen, I'm not quite so sure about, but like you, I want it now. But heaven is what you make it. I'm living my heaven on earth now. So honestly, I couldn't imagine it, which I'm welcoming for it, to be here sooner and bigger and better. But basically saying, if mine doesn't get any better, I'm pretty darn blissful, to be honest with you.
I believe that. I mean, I have that in my own life. It's like, I really believe that we have to have it in our own life if we're to do any good with that out in the world. You can't run around like a chicken with your head cut off, chasing things you can't see about your own self, right? I agree with you. I think when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, we're really here to have our own experience individualized. I mean, why else is humanity so individual, but yet we are all the same? I mean, we're not really all the same, even though we all have same characteristics of, you know, basic human bodies and stuff. We're really not the same. We all come from different experiences. We all have a different timeline. We all have a different combination of ingredients that makes us who we are at this very moment. And so I think it then becomes, I'm interested in knowing who you are, learning about you, because I'm not going to just show up and say, I already know you. I already get you. I've already figured you out. What's the fun in that? So I think it then becomes, again, a conversation, an inspirational moment where we have an opportunity to see the special in what may appear to be ordinary, even if it's a connection that's, you know.
Finding the diamond in the peanut butter jar.
Yeah, for ourselves too, and to see that. But I think first we have to see that within ourselves.
Yeah.
And we can philosophize about that all we want, but if there's not a good chemistry or synergy, philosophy doesn't happen. It just falls flat. It's a flat conversation. We don't muse on the possibilities, or you say something which inspires me to say something, which then inspires you to say something, and so on and so forth. I think that's the point. We're here to really have those kinds of high quality interactions with people. We just have to weed out the drama. And we have to weed out the woundage, and we have to just be 100% compassionate and understanding of ourselves and others. I see way too many of this going on in the new age industry, where it's kind of like a henching. You know, somebody's, oh, they're dark, they don't do this, they don't do that. There's so much judgment going on, which is counterproductive to the whole movement in the first place. So it has to make you wonder, well, even as we evolve, we get into more of a thoughtful way of interacting with each other instead of judgmental way of interacting with each other. And then once that reaches critical mass, we all begin to kind of live that way and change our cultures and our communities and our families and our homes accordingly. So how do you see, what would you advise somebody coming up to you and saying, what's the first thing that I could do to put myself on a more spiritual path? What would you say to them?
I would teach them the importance, the foundation, and the art of meditation. But the first thing I would suggest is meditation, so they can begin to know and experience who they are. And meditation is an amazing catalyst for that. That is about experiential. That is about making it tangible, so you can have more of the aha than the uh-huh. Second thing I would suggest is stop. Just stop. Stop it all. Stop fighting yourself. A new thing I've been saying a lot on Facebook: get out of the fight. Get out. Get out. When you do, you're not in the fight. You're in the ease. You're on the river on the raft. Instead of paddling upstream, the current is pushing you. Get out of the fight. If you're fighting yourself, get out. If you're fighting your family, get out. If you're fighting the world, get out. Get out of the internal mess that somehow, strangely, we seem to like to wallow in. Get out. Get out of the fight.
Get out of the fight.
Get out of the fight. Get out.
That's amazing. I'm having an aha moment right now.
Go for it. I'll wait patiently.
Stop the show. I'm having an aha moment. No, I'm just kidding. Don't stop the show.
And don't do the things that you don't want to do. Get out of the fight. Because I don't want to do this thing, but I feel obligated because it's my mother's boyfriend or whatever. Get out of the fight. You're fighting. You're resisting. You're going against the grain of your essence. There's only a source of well-being. There's not a source of non-well-being. And when you're not in well-being mode, you are going against the essence of who you are.
I agree 100% on that. And I would like to add to that, if I may. I would like to say that there's also a time to say no to energies you don't want to mix your own with. Discernment is an important quality to have. And if something doesn't feel right to you, please trust that, right? I mean, to not trust that is to go and to be completely disloyal to yourself and put yourself into a situation that you don't want to be in. And you already know that, but you're doing it anyway for whatever reason. And if people don't understand it, that's okay. If they don't understand why you don't want to fight, or they might be fighting over there and everybody's watching the one side of the fight, and then they turn over here to see the, and it's crickets, because there is no fight. There's not two forces coming at each other for show. I have said many times that to lay down the sword and pick up the flower is a level of wisdom. It's a level of wisdom, and I'm thankful to understand that wisdom at this point in my life. I'm Irish. I have some Irish in me, so I'm like born. I've been a fighter my whole life. Fight for justice, fight for truth, fight for my space. But the thing is that the fighting then changes to just being true to yourself and saying no when necessary, saying yes when you know it's right, and trusting that 1,000 times over than not trusting it. Wouldn't you say?
Amen. Amen.
So what do you want to talk about now, Keith? I mean, what's going on? Like, where are you at? What do you think?
Here's a side of me that you are not even familiar with. Let's take a ride. I know that you do a lot of interviews surrounding aliens, extraterrestrials, and that whole MUFON kind of thing. I want to bring that really home to you and to the listening audience, whoever you may be. I'm sure 98 whatever % of the world believes in UFOs and aliens. Well, what I'm going to tell you now, because I am the guy next door, I have no reason to kid you, none. And what I tell you, and I use this often, on my son's life, every fiber of my being, what I'm about to tell you is true. 1998, when I was teaching that spiritual class, a friend of mine by the name of Laura, kind of like you would be to me, a sister energy that we just bond and connect. She was a goofy girl. And she comes over to me one day while we're waiting in line for the center to open so we can go in and have our Sunday church service. She says, Keith, good to see you. Keith, I got something different. I said, okay, Laura, what's up? She goes, do you want to meet an alien? I was waiting for the joke. She wasn't joking. I said, are you sure? She goes, Keith, are you sure? I said, yes. She goes, follow me. Now, I'm walking about 40 feet to wherever it is she's going to take me. Have no idea what to expect. Excuse me. I didn't know if I'm going to see a little green man jump from behind the building and say, nanu, nanu. I didn't know what was going to happen. She walks me over to this 5'1" woman who was facing the opposite way and says, Keith, I want you to meet Nucleus 8. Nucleus 8, meet Keith Blanchard. 5'1", I'm 5'4.5". When this woman turns around, a male 7 foot tall alien human hybrid energy slams me. Bam! And this isn't me being Mr. Psychic to trying to intuit. I was hit. And the voice that came out of this woman is not doable by any actor. I don't care who you are. It's not. And it said, what do you want from me? What a strange way to greet somebody. What do I want from you? I was perplexed by the question. And then he was using that to make a light point, to keep the spirit light. He starts laughing. He goes, can I help you with that? I said, sure. He says, you want data. I want data? That's such an alien word. Why not information, conversation, or friendship, or can we chat for a bit? And so over a course of 4 years, we began to befriend each other. She was someone who was married to a 40-year clinical psychologist. So he knows what human behavior looks like. She went to the psychologist, the she that channeled the being, because she had some abuse problems as a kid. And when she laid on his table for the first time, the first entity to come through her was a fairy by the name of Perithnia and says, Mister, I don't know what you think you're doing here, But if you think you're going to hurt her any more than she has, I will stop you myself. This began to happen to Rex Hare for a period. Then he decided he's going to bring some of his colleagues in to see what's going on, to experience her having an archangel, Nucleus 8, a fairy, a shaman, whoever come through. And this is not just conscious channel. The being is literally in the body. And he brings his colleagues in and he said, Rex, you're on your own with this one. We don't know what this is. Long story short, as I become friends with Nucleus 8, we call him Nuke, sometimes we call him 8. One night, Rex and Marjorie, Star One, comes over and Nucleus decides he's going to come into her body. It happens just like that. And he puts me in a very light meditation and he whispers in my ear. He says, hey, Keith, remember that journey I promised you? I said, yep. He goes, you ready? I said, hell yeah, I'm ready. He said, all right, give me your arm. I give him my arm. And he begins to pull on my arm as if I'm tugging on my shirt like this. And my consciousness begins to leave my body through my arm, just like that tug on my shirt. And then he lets go. And he says, what's the matter? I said, dude, I'm trying to make this happen. Figure it out. He goes, Keith, that's your problem right there. Don't do anything. Let go. Get out of the fight, basically. He says, we're going to do this again. And he pulls on my arm. And I get out about 20 feet. I got a little better. And he lets go. And I said, what's the matter? He goes, Keith, some part of you is holding on. I cannot and will not ever violate your free will. But tell me, what did you see while you were out of your body? I was in a ship. I walked into the ship. My first thought of where are the chairs? The chairs pop out at my will. When I was done with the thought, the chairs go back. They conserve energy on every level. He is a galactic police officer. He was grown. His mother was a gray alien. His father was an Egyptian king. He was grown, hence his name is Nucleus. He is number 8 on the board of 12, hence his name Nucleus 8. He is head of security of this quadrant of our galaxy. He has a finger in every pie. He can monitor 6 dimensions simultaneously of awareness. Nothing goes by him unmonitored. And I begin to have experiences with Nucleus 8 for over a period of 4 years of the most far out things that most people wouldn't even believe I am professing right here in this moment.
Wow. Well, you're right. I have had a lot of conversations with people over the last decade on this topic. I've done a lot of shows with some well-known people and some not well-known people, and I've read a lot of information, and I've done a lot of field work in this stuff too. And I have an opinion that I guess I have formed because of all of it. And I just get really skeptical with some of the channeling, the ETs. I don't know if you're familiar with Eve Lorgen. She did some work with removing implants and using hypnosis to go back and to kind of get into people's minds, because it is said that the aliens have an ability to use the human mental realm and to manipulate the human mental realm and to influence it in a variety of different ways. That said, it's like, how do you discern between, the intention of the force coming to you to work with you? Did you just feel that it was okay, that it was right, that it was a good, healthy fit? Was it uncomfortable throughout the times of contact? A lot of contactees will have a lot of feelings of uncomfortableness. It makes them anxious. They have a lot of symptoms around it, some PTSD sometimes. I've heard horror stories from contact experiences. I've heard blissful experiences about contact experiences. And then I've heard stories about the blissful being manipulated. And I've heard stories about, I've heard it all, Keith. Okay. Sure. I've been in this business for a long time. I've heard it all. Okay. I feel for the people who get into the ET industry, the UFO industry, and try to navigate the information. It is so freaking confusing.
There's so much of it.
contradicts itself all over the place. Then you have the groupies of who believes this and who believes that. And then you have the people who proclaim to be leaders in the industry who don't get along with anybody else, and you can't sit them in a seminar or a conference together because they don't like each other. It just gets so ridiculous. I stopped talking about the UFO ET thing years ago because it was so annoying to have to dig through that. And then when I started to ask questions, some were very uncomfortable with the questions I was asking because I wasn't just jumping on the bandwagon saying, wow, that must be great. And oh my God.
Because you're smart.
I want to go talk to that one too. No. I think we have a responsibility to protect our etheric consciousness space.
Yeah.
And the minute that we let something else into that, I don't know. You have to be careful, right? What's your advice to people? I mean, what do you tell people who come to you and say, wow, it's a great experience, but I'm scared?
Scared is good. Scared is okay. Scared is just an awareness of something that is beyond my scope of understanding, which creates a point of awareness, which you can do something about to either continue to be scared or dive into the rabbit hole and learn more about it. That way you impregnate yourself with power and you're no longer living in illusion. I'm telling you, listening audience, and I'm saying this to hear myself, he was real. He wasn't she wasn't channeling. The energy was living in that body, sometimes days at a time, where she was gallivanting across in the universe. How do I know it was good? I had one disagreement with this person in 4 years. The evidence of everything that has happened to me with him is there. How do I know that I'm not being harmed? Because you will know them by their fruit. I have never been violated. My life is ongoing bliss. He called me one day. Hey, Keith. He said, hey, Nuke, what's going on, buddy? He goes, hello, how you doing? Keith, we had a group of about 7 people. We did every other Sunday meditation. Of course, he's the alien, so we gave him the leader of the group role. And he calls me one day and says, Keith, everyone in our group has an implant but you. Do you want it? He said, they're smaller than your eye can see, and I make them myself. I have one left. Do you want it? Now, keep in mind, at that time, he was 4,720 years old in one life. He said, do you want it? I said, convince me. He said, all right. If you're lost, we can find you. If you're in trouble, we can help you. And if you're sick, we can administer medicine. I said, all right, what's the drawback? He said, your life is no longer private. He says, do you have anything you're ashamed of? I went, thinking as if there might be. No, I think we're fine. He says, Keith, no one will have access to your file but me. Hence, I'm head of security. And I won't even go into your file unless I knew on some level that you are summoning me to come to you because you are in trouble or need my attention. Then I would open up your file and find out what I need to do to help you. I said, I want it. He said, okay, the next time you and I speak, being in public or over the phone, this will be implanted. I play 7 sets at the casino or some grueling night. Go to sleep. The last thing I'm interested in is dreaming, much less about aliens. I wake up in the morning in the dreamscape with an excruciating pain in my right kidney. It wasn't beyond my will, I agreed, but it hurt. And so I'm looking over my shoulder to find out the source of this pain. And there was the equivalent of what I would say would be a 75-year-old human woman, but in alien terms, however old she had to be that kind of person. She picks me up and starts cradling me and walking me towards where he's sitting, which looks like what we would call a lawn chair. And as I'm looking over my shoulder, she's telepathically looking at me going, and in that she's saying, you silly little boy, you went into this with the idea it was going to be painful. And guess what, Keith? You're right. And the pain was so intense, I began to vomit. And as she walks me towards him sitting on this lawn chair, I continued vomiting, and I vomited all over his feet. My phone in my house rings, and guess who's on the phone? It's Nucleus 8. And I said, dude, I just had a dream about you. He said, no, you didn't, Keith. I said, dude, don't tell me. I just had a dream about you. He says, Keith, you did not have a dream about me. I said, are you sure about that? He says, the vomit all over my feet says so. That solidified it for me. I did believe a lot of the experiences, which are oodles of them, before, But that's the one that closed the lid for me and said, this is really, really happening in this way.
Do you ever wonder if the language that they use sounds a lot like some advanced digital alien ship? Have you ever thought that maybe we've just become so digitalized because it's easier for ETs to manage?
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. If they are so advanced and they can come here and they have the technology and the intelligence to infiltrate and observe and study us, which would be the logical type steps of an alien type invasion, figuring out our structures, figuring out our psychology, experimenting with us socially, but then unifying all of us as a digital imprint, which your experience kind of confirms this to me. You know, the data reference, we have access to your file, that kind of thing. I did a talk with David Lewis Anderson back in 2010. At the time, he was a private company and he was working on time travel technology, and he had actually developed a mechanism that could send data back in time. And soon after that, he was put into the government sector, and he wasn't doing any more interviews. You didn't see him on the circuit anymore. He wasn't talking to any alternative media people. He kind of disappeared for five years or so. He would surface every now and then at a conference in Romania. I would hear and offer some insight into the advancements of that since then. But I will never forget my conversation with him, because one of the things that he suggested, and his credentials were very legitimate and scientific, and his background was just exponentially validating of his work. One of the things he suggested was that we are actually being visited from the future, and that a lot of these ET-type beings, energies, or whatever, however we experience them or perceive them, even within people or not, has to do with a projection of sorts coming back in time. Because if you think about it, in the future, we've already developed the technology capable of coming back in time. So at some point in the spectrum, we are now, in the past. If a man discovers the ability, or a government discovers the ability to send information back in time, wouldn't the logical thing be that if culture has stayed similar to what it is now, wouldn't that be a militarized type data? I mean, wouldn't the military then develop some kind of communication with the future where they could send information back and use it as the way to assassinate certain people that they don't want to come into power, break up certain relationships that even create those people?
Are we quite so sure that has not happened? Kennedy has died.
Well, that's kind of where I'm going with it. Yeah, I'm kind of going like, I kind of see this, this is a possibility. And even in Hollywood, when you talk about certain movies or you watch storylines, you have hints of this. And so that always tells me that someone somewhere knows something, right? How do you know what you're dealing with? Is it maybe something to do with an ancestor of yours in the future that is coming back to you through your file to get into you for some purpose? Have you had any kind of insight into that?
As far as him going into my file?
Yeah, just, how do you know it's not a future relative of yours coming back to assist in some way? Has that happened? Is that there or no?
I can tell. No, I don't know how to answer that, but I do know that when I have higher level experiences, when I go to the past, it's black and white for me, which implies the past. That's what the trick my mind plays. But I have actually went to my younger self in the past and talked to my younger self and said, Keith, don't. And I'm sitting against a school locker all bummed out because I just got bullied by somebody 2 years my senior, popped me on the head with the senior ring or whatever the situation may be. But I do have knowledge and experience of going back to myself in the past and talking to my younger self. Absolutely. So I understand that idea for sure.
Yeah, and I'm a Reiki practitioner. I'm a master teacher at Asui and Karuna, and one of the things that we teach in the Reiki modality is the ability to heal through time. And there's actual kanji that is all about healing in time. And you can literally draw the kanji over like a person's picture or somebody who's passed or whatever context you want to put it in. And you can send the healing energy back. And there are times, I'm sure we all can remember when we were younger, where we had some kind of influence come in. We might have said it was angelic. We might have said it was divine intervention, but it could very well have been the consciousness of our future self doing exactly what you just described. So my first intuitive thought into your story when you shared it was, oh my goodness, I wonder if this is somebody from Keith's future, whether it's biologically related or not, coming back to work with your energy specifically. Because I believe that they do that. I believe that they have found a way to communicate with us back in time. And it's not always used for, good purposes. That sometimes it's used for manipulation or to manipulate time and events and things of that sort. I don't think enough people talk about it. I think that there needs to be more shows and more information out there about potential realities of that kind of technology, because it's real. It's really out there. They really have CERN, I believe, honestly, is part of an energy source to help facilitate the kind of power that needs to happen to help to power whatever technology that creates that. So we're always looking for bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, more and more powerful. Well, for what? To smash particles together and find particles? That's insane. And now China is building an even bigger CERN facility than what's in Switzerland. And it's set to come out online, within the next decade or so. And they're doing the nuclear explosions underground right now. And they're opening up the earth and they're doing all these crazy things. And people are wondering why we're having earthquakes in Tibet. Hello.
Yeah, we don't need to open up any more external particles. If we can open up this particle, there is a greater power in here that can be unleashed more than some physical apparatus outside of. The power in here explodes big bangs. It creates worlds. It creates universes. They should be looking inside and then use the power that they glean from universal knowledge. And we can make this place energy free. It's happening. It's we just a little impatient sometimes. We want it.
I think it is happening, and we need to give it credit.
It is.
You need to stop focusing so much attention on the Illuminati and the call and the. I'm so tired of hearing that information. I know it's real. I know what's what. I'm intelligent enough and I'm educated enough in the information. I think most people are becoming that as well. So what do you do with it? Well, now that you know, go out and create something that's not that. Yeah. Because something down the road associated to what we're all up against technically has already planned the next phase in favor of that. And unless somebody really stands up and starts to create, and I think that I really believe that the solutions to that are coming through the children, the generations coming up behind us, that they're definitely being born with the answers within them. And if we can nurture them and ripen their intellect and teach them intuition and show them the right kinds of information, we might have a renaissance of consciousness on this planet that we have been all praying for on some level. And I hope I see that in my lifetime before I pass away. I really do. I pray for that. Well, we're kind of at the end of the show. We have a few minutes left. So why don't you tell me where people can find you? What do you do? What can you offer our viewers if they want to say, hey, I want to get to know Keith a little more, what this guy's all about? Where can we find you?
You can go to KeithAnthonyBlanchard.com or centeroflightradio.com. It'll take you to the same place. You can contact me via email, KeithAnthonyBlanchard@gmail.com. Listen, I'm the guy next door. Though a lot of people may see me as a elite spiritual teacher, I do put on that hat sometimes. I love people. I love you. I want you to contact me. Say hi. I'm an approachable guy. What you can expect from me is real. You ask me a question. If you open that door, I'm not going to open the door with you. I'm going to kick it in. So if you're serious, contact me. I'm the kind of guy that jumps off the cliff. I don't wait around in the water. If there's a problem for me, I'm diving in head first, and I will trust that my parachute will open as I jump. But in my free fall before I hit the ground, I will figure it out, and that's what I offer. But I'm all about unification of people. I like seeing people happy. It is my life. Being a touch, a look, a gesture, a word, an ear. I love changing people, not from I need to fix you because you're broken point of view. It's something that comes through me that brings me joy. And that's just what I do and who I am. And everything at my website, KeithAnthonyBlanchard.com. I have a movie about my life made from Bluecast Productions out of New York. Do What You Love, A Path to Passionate Living. I make these little bursts of light videos that last about 8 minutes. I sit in front of this camera, and I find a theme for the day, and they're doing extremely well. I have tons and tons of hits per installment. But this is what I do every day, Hillary. I create, and I do absolutely nothing that I don't want to do. Ever, 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 never. And I understand doing favors for people and sacrificing a part of myself, provided in my sacrificing that I find joy to do that for that person. But if I feel like I'm doing it for obligation reasons, I will squash it.
Keith Anthony Blanchard, author of The Divine Principle, Anchoring Heaven on Earth. Everybody, thanks so much for joining me here, me and Keith. Please check out his work. He's got some great offerings, really genuine, authentic person, and one of my favorite people to talk to on the air. All right, that does it. It's a wrap. Thanks for being here. Thanks, Keith, so much for being here. And everybody else, until next time, namaste.